All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second Rust Gamedev Meetup, the meetup for February. Uh, hello. So I'm going to get started now. It's 11 o'clock here on the east coast of Canada. So good morning to everybody on the west coast of NA. Good afternoon to everybody in Europe. Good evening to everybody in Asia. And good morning to everybody in Australia. And so got a decent amount of people watching on Twitch so far. Got the main live studio audience where everybody's muted. We got them all filled up at 35 people, so that's pretty cool. And so today we have quite a few pretty awesome projects to show off. I've tried to up the production quality from like the Twitch side of things a little bit, but we'll see how that goes. And as always, if there's anything that you recommend changing, since this is only a second one, I am very happy to take any input. I'm just gonna make sure that I can actually hear myself on Twitch. All right, cool. And then also, although we have several people who are going to be demoing their projects, feel free to send me a message on Discord if you want to be added to that list as well. So to get started, as before, I'm your host. My name is Forrest. I'm a student in Ottawa. I like doing Rust Gamedev, but more from like a meta perspective at the moment. I've done a lot of work on Veloren. I'm co-hosting Rust Gamedev podcast. And I'm really enjoying like doing like a lot of outreach to the community types of things. And so, oh man, 4 screens and a mouse, it's difficult to tell where it is. All right. So the point of the meetup is, let's see if I can, okay, is to show off a lot of work that people are doing in the Rust Gamedev community each month. We have it on the second week of the second weekend of the month, so hopefully I can remind you to go check out the newsletter that came out last weekend. Take a look at all of this, the write-ups that are going on, and the other points of the meetup are to kind of hang out with the people in the community, and so find out the people behind the projects, like learn more about them, chat afterwards, and have a pretty good time. And so we'll start with the show and tell. We will see how long each one takes. I'm estimating about 10 minutes per, but we shall kind of go back and forth and see how stuff works.
Respawn immediately. But as you can see, we generate many kinds of different biomes. So this is kind of a savanna type biome at the moment. Lots of creatures here that you can interact with and take a look at. If we go out further, you can see we're sort of approaching a desert now, and the terrain is starting to give way to more desert-like terrain. So everything transitions smoothly. We're relatively realistic in how we simulate things like temperature and humidity. More realistic than most voxel games anyway. So yeah, there's a lot of pleasing environments to explore. And I encourage anyone that's interested in contributing to join us on our Discord or get involved with the community. Oh, here we go. I found a tree that has some platforms on it and staircases. So this is quite new. I've been working on this in the last few days. I think that about sums it up.
Muted. Hello. Okay, I think Twitch can hear me. I think Twitch can hear you. I think, but I'm not entirely
Okay,
sure.
great.
Yeah, it's back and forth a lot. I think the problem was that I was like Discord hijacked what was like the audio was coming out of, and then for whatever reason OBS was not happy with that. Um, yeah, so I don't know if you showed it yet, but is it possible to show like the aurora by chance?
Oh yeah, sure.
That'd be super cool to see.
I think the first night after the world's epoch has an aurora. So here we go. You can see there are some quite nice sights. I zoom out a lot. You can see that the aurora and the clouds are actually 3D. They're raycasted. So it's quite nice, and they move as well. Yeah, it's just generally quite a pleasant experience exploring the world at different times of day.
I'm taking a look and seeing if there's any questions here. It's mostly just talking about how to fix OBS, and so I appreciate all the help. Someone asked RTX Veloren when. Classic question.
Well, I mean, we're not that far off it in some ways, I guess, given that the clouds raycasted. That's basically ray tracing, right?
And then someone else was impressed by the volumetric clouds. I think if there's any questions, feel free to ask them in chat. I don't really know the questions to ask because I work a lot on this. But if you have any questions, you can always direct them to Zester afterwards.
A few bits of information, I guess, in terms of the technicals. We're using an ECS internally. We're currently using the older version of GFX, but we have a branch in progress that transitions us to WGPU. Everything seems to be working great on that front. So I imagine within a month or so, we'll have moved to that permanently. The game is multiplayer, as I say, so there's a lot of networking stuff going on and syncing of ECSs. The client and the front end that you're seeing now, the graphical part, are entirely decoupled, and so it's possible to write entirely new front ends for the game. I've written a command line front end which shows you the game in sort of a NetHack Dwarf Fortress style, and it's compatible with regular servers, of course. Yeah, it's quite a fun project if anyone's looking to learn about Rust, I guess, and learn about working on a large game dev project.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Zester, and I hope that we can show off Veloren again next month with some of the changes that would be done. We do have a Veloren meeting tomorrow, and so if anybody's interested in seeing more of like the behind-the-scenes stuff, feel free to drop in on the Veloren server, and you can join that meeting.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks for watching.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm working on a open source node-based graphics editor for 2D. Basically, the goal is to solve the problems that currently use Photoshop and Illustrator to solve. And the goal is to make something very broad and versatile for a lot of different uses, but also largely focused on at least my personal use case, which is both photography and things that are related to game development. So if you're working on textures for your games or something like that, this is a really good way of having an open source alternative to having to pay lots and lots of money for Photoshop and deal with the fact that it was developed 30 years ago and it's only been redesigned never, but it's been only getting slow incremental improvements. The goal here is to basically take a Houdini-like approach for it. So the goal with Graphite is to become basically Blender's 2D counterpart. Blender is awesome at being an open source 3D program, and this should be an open source 2D program that complements it well. And it should be versatile enough for every 2D use case, and it's being designed as such for that exact purpose. To also Houdinify or make it more like Houdini, the 2D raster and vector art workflow, something that you normally would use Photoshop and Illustrator for. If you can actually make it more like Houdini and more like a pipeline and more procedural, that would be really, really helpful to speed up the way that you work in a lot of different tasks and make it more integrated with a pipeline. And also the other huge goal for me, because I'm also a UX designer as a hobby, I guess, is making a very approachable and delightful user experience. The interface is super important, and if people are frustrated, that is just a problem to begin with. So having an awesome UI and UX is a big, big focus. Also, taking cues from the way that Photoshop, I think, did a really good job with its workflow. Don't change the things that aren't broken. So it's kind of starting out with a lot of similarities, and that is also going to make it very familiar with new users. The very core selling point is that everything that you do is non-destructive. So the goal with that is to make it so you can go back and change different parameters that you've worked on in the past, and not have to worry about the fact that you have to hit Control Z a bunch and then return to redo all the work that you were working on. Okay, and also the other big selling point is that it is resolution agnostic, which means that you can actually zoom in forever, or you can change the document resolution and export a higher resolution version whenever you want. It basically just re-renders all the work you've ever done in the node graph at a higher resolution or a lower resolution, and you can just change that on the fly. And there's really no reason that a resolution exists for any reason besides the convenience of being able to hit the arrow keys to move items around by pixels. That's kind of the only concept of pixels. And then also it has the simplicity of layers, but the power of nodes. So it actually has a hybrid system of layers and nodes together that are actually the same concept, but you can view it the simple way with layers or the more complex way by seeing an entire node graph. And then also it is free and open source and easily extensible. So I think that Blender has proven the way towards making an awesome 3D program that is open source and rapidly evolving. And I think if it's open source, that will make it that'll make Graphite in the future be extremely powerful as well. It also has a big plugin ecosystem. And finally, it has desktop native performance thanks to Rust, and also it can compile to WebAssembly, which means that it's even more accessible. It would be awesome if Photoshop, for example, actually had a web version, so you could just open it up in a browser and use it whenever you needed to. If you're, on a borrowed computer or something, you don't actually have the time to install it. Here is a quick demo of the user interface. And you've got the toolbar on the left, pretty similar to the way that Photoshop deals with things, and also I guess Blender even has its toolbar on the left now. And you can choose between all these different tools. And what the tools actually do is they edit and manipulate the node graph for you. So if you go and select the brush tool and you start brushing around, what it's going to do is it's going to record the pixels that your mouse moves. And then those mouse movements will actually get recorded into a vector format, which is basically a recording of the pixels, the coordinates of the pixels that you traveled to. And then it creates a brush rasterizer. And what that does is it basically rasterizes the actual brush strokes based upon the vector input data. And that way you have an entirely non-destructive approach, and you can always go back and tweak the actual brush strokes. So for some quick use case examples, just to give an idea about how this might work. Let's say you're designing a board game and you've got a lot of cards, and traditionally you'd have to go in Photoshop and update the text in every single card. And then if you decide to change the way that the layout works on a card, or for the entire system of cards, you'd have to go back and change 100 cards and make the same change over and over. It would be really cool if you could basically make a single design, but then make it data-driven. So you could actually create a spreadsheet with all your different cards and import that spreadsheet as a CSV file or some other format. Then for every single row in your spreadsheet, it would be able to export a separate PNG or a separate PDF or whatever output format you want. And whenever you update any of the text inside of your spreadsheet, it will export an entirely new set of images for all of your different cards that you've been designing. Another example is if you are working on a laser cutter and you need to basically create some design. Let's say you have customers on Etsy and you want those customers to submit custom artwork, and then you're able to lay it out and pack it all together most efficiently and then laser cut it before you ship it to them. What it can do is it can actually just take the source data, potentially even from like an API in the future, if it actually has a web API input for one data source as part of its pipeline. Then it can go through a process that you define to automate the process of processing it and getting it ready for laser cutting, and then it can export it to a format that the laser is compatible with. One more example would be you could actually run the renderer for Graphite on a server, and let's say you run a custom T-shirt website and people can upload artwork, and you want to display some model that has that T-shirt on, and they're wearing your T-shirt with the simulation of their uploaded artwork. You can basically make it so it runs through the compositing steps and automatically creates a final, really high quality preview of their artwork on a T-shirt model. So those are just some examples. And now talking about why we're all here, which is Rust. So the technology stack is Rust with WGPU, and that way it can work with all the 3 different platforms without having to worry about manually implementing all the native features, all of the native features for the graphics processing. And then the goal right now, I believe, is to use Pathfinder, which is a Rust rasterization library for vectors, and then compiling to the 3 major platforms as well as WebAssembly. So why Rust? The idea is that we're just starting out on a project and we'd like to future-proof it for the future. Also, complex image editing requires a lot of speed because you're potentially working with very complex documents. So you'd like to have the speed of a native platform. And then also safety means that we can eliminate a lot of the bugs that are possible. We could, in theory, at least get rid of all crashes and make it so users don't have to worry about losing work. And then also the easy multi-threading that Rust provides makes it so it's easy for us to write code that is highly multi-threaded and takes advantage of parallelism. And then also it compiles nicely to WebAssembly, which means that you can access it on the web in addition to downloading a native version of the application. So talking real quick about the layer and node hybrid, which is, I think, a major selling point. You're able to have the convenience of nodes, convenience of layers, but also the power of nodes, and you can jump back and forth between them. You might have to worry about nodes becoming kind of a big spaghetti graph, but you can actually separate your concerns and work mostly with layers. Can we have the best of both worlds? Yes, we can, because a node graph is actually just a directed acyclic graph or a DAG, and that can be represented as a tree. And a node graph, a layer panel, is actually just a tree in Photoshop. So you can actually display both pretty similarly, and you just have a little bit more detail in the node graph, but it's a simpler version of being displayed with a layer panel. And you can actually work with both simultaneously. And then the tools manipulate the node graph. So basically, if you go and use the brush, it will update the data that is actually located within the nodes. So it updates those parameters and changes things for you. Or you can actually go into the node graph and make the tweaks yourself to the actual parameters. So the raster pipeline is really interesting because it's resolution agnostic. So it doesn't actually work with baked-in pixels. It works with the idea that it's going to be rendering whatever is in the node graph at whatever zoom level that you're currently viewing in your viewport, or when you're exporting it, what the actual resolution of the document is, or of the exported images. And the way that it renders is it basically takes all the images on your screen and then it sort of ray traces. Conceptually, it's kind of like a ray tracer where it goes up the node graph, except it's in 2D, of course. And it goes up the node graph and applies all the different effects that you might have applied in the render pipeline. Also, it uses an HDR color space, so your regular RGB kind of values from 0 to 255, they are mapped to the 0 to 1 space, and then everything can be above and below that as well. So if you import an EXR image, for example, if you're working on trying to do image editing on a panoramic HDRI background that you want to use in a game, that will work actually very well with this pipeline. You can import bitmap images, and basically they just get sampled at whatever resolution you are at. So obviously, if you zoom in enough, you're going to be getting a blurry one, but you could also set it to be blurry or pixelated or upscale with different algorithms, and you just choose the sampling method for your imported image. Then brush samplers are basically nodes that turn your vectors from your mouse movement as you're drawing with a brush into something that actually gets drawn. This is actually my master's thesis right now. I'm just studying my master's degree at Cal Poly in California. And the goal basically is to simulate the way that brushes in real life work, where they have bristles with ink and so on, or ink or paint. And the goal here is to render those pixels and display it at whatever resolution that you might be zoomed into. And then also there's a little bit more complexity with something like blur, because you can ray trace very easily up the node graph if it stays within the same pixel, but blur requires knowledge of the surrounding pixels. So it's a little bit slower. You got to sort of stop going up the node graph, then do a blur, and then keep going up the node graph from that point. And then finally, this will actually be quite computationally intensive if you combine a bunch of blur nodes and different things. It is in Photoshop as well, but it's simply they take the approach of just being destructive. You have to bake it into the pixels, and you can't go back and change parameters like how much to blur or whatever your effect is. So the solution here is to use a lot of predictive caching. So if you have a little spare CPU time or GPU time, it'll go and prepare the surrounding area for you in case you might zoom in or in case you might pan around and try and view a different area. It'll use that spare time to go and predictively cache that, and then also progressively enhance. So as you're drawing with a brush, it might do a low quality preview while you're working, but then it will do a higher quality preview as soon as it gets the time to catch up. The vector pipeline is very closely coupled with the raster pipeline. Basically, all data in the application is vector, including your mouse movements that it records when you're doing a brush stroke. And it basically creates a spreadsheet with a bunch of XY coordinates, wherever you're moving your mouse or wherever you're drawing with the pen tool or creating an ellipse or creating a Bezier curve. All of those are basically XY coordinates stored into a spreadsheet. And you might have extra columns for certain things, like your pen pressure. If you're using a tablet, that's an extra column. Also the tilt of the pen and different things like that. Those all just become extra columns that can be used by certain nodes that require those extra columns. Bezier curve vector art works non-destructively by making all your edits in sort of a stack. So if you go and add a point or delete a point or move a point around, it will record that action into a stack, and you can actually still go and edit those parametrically. Brush strokes work by storing your mouse movement or your pen tablet movement and the actual pixels that it moves around. So as you move your mouse around, it records that into the node, into the spreadsheet basically that is stored within the node, and then it can get rendered however your node setup works. Selections, like you do in Photoshop with a marching ants, they're actually just a mask, essentially, and usually that's going to be composed of vector shapes. So if you want to do a regular marquee selection with a rectangle, you'll actually just use the vector rectangle and create a mask out of that. Or you can use the polygon tool, or which is actually the pen tool, and create custom shapes like that. And now, real quick, talking about the implementation. So we're currently just shy of 2,000 lines of code, which is not much. We're far further ahead in the design aspect. I've actually been putting significant thought into the design for the past 3 years or so, and I have a pretty comprehensive way that the overall system will work. But the code is something I'm just been starting out with in the last year and in my free time, which has been somewhat limited lately. The first step basically is building a GUI, because for a project this complex and which has this far of a future, it needs to be able to support things like plugins and the ability to have very extensible UI. So we're basically being inspired by Vue.js, which is a JavaScript framework, as well as React, and building sort of an XML-based markup language for displaying a GUI. And that way people can actually continue to add plugins and things in the future that extend the UI and give it a lot of a future. And also we need to pick a GUI scripting language at the moment. And if you have any thoughts on that, please let me know. And then after GUI comes the render engine and also the node graph data engine. Those will be kind of the core things that Graphite is. Everything else above that is basically just a bunch of nodes. So yeah, we're looking for coders and technical advisors to help out. We've got a Discord server set up if you want to join that. Visit graphite.design, which is the website. Currently just links to the GitHub repository, and that GitHub repository has a link to the Discord server. So please join if you're interested in this project, because I definitely don't have all the time in the world to make such an ambitious project on my own. So thank you. Are there any questions?
All right. So yeah, that's super cool. I think one of the things that I have always thought the most while I'm working with these types of this type of software is the idea of like destructive choices that I make. And so when I'm doing stuff in Photoshop, when I drag the brush or do whatever, then I know that I've just deleted stuff from below it. And so yeah, I think that's a very interesting type of approach. And then I think second of all, I'm a really big fan of remaking a lot of these types of technology that are more accessible on the web. And so I think one of the big ones that I've seen in previous years is Figma. And so I'm sure that in the future there's going to be a lot more that come out. So I'm just checking chat to see if there's any questions. If you want to just take a look through the Meetup chat, I think there's a few that have already been answered.
Look at it. Let's see. Just scrolling through things. To answer, what are we using as a graphic front end? WGPU is being used for rendering, and I could not find a suitable GUI library, so I'm kind of taking the build-it-yourself approach, because that is needed for the future of the project if we want to be able to support plugins and all the different types of things that are needed for a rich ecosystem of extensions and all that kind of thing in the future. What cutout animation features are in scope of this project? Okay, so I don't know what it means by cutout animation, but animation is a future goal where it actually works very well to be able to animate. So essentially implementing a timeline where that timeline is essentially a variable that gets put into, that can be used as a parameter inside of the node graph. That can power a lot of really complex animations that are entirely built within the scope of the node compositing approach. But that will be sort of a later stretch goal, because the initial approach is just building out the actual compositing system and the tool system and the node system. Other questions? What's the branch for the UI? Yes, currently master is actually just a blank screen which displays, I think, a texture, and that's because a lot of the UI work right now is going on purely as data structure kind of stuff, and it's not currently hooked up to the way that WGPU is rendering different things to the screen. So my first approach, my very first thing when I was learning Rust and working on this project, was to set up WGPU and make it render some very simple stuff and sort of create a little bit of an abstraction layer. And then the next thing that I did was I moved on to creating a bunch of data structures that are needed to parse this XML-based language that is pretty similar to HTML and pretty similar to Vue.js and React. But currently hooking up those two aspects, the visual part and the data structures, is the step where I'm kind of stuck, because I also need to pick a scripting language to be able to make those, to make the different components of the UI actually functional. So if you have any thoughts, please jump on the Discord server for this project and let me know what you think about the scripting language.
Awesome. So next up, we have Acton here to talk about a 2D space MMO that they are working on.
Cool. Thank you. I am John. I have been working on this for
close to a year, but honestly, this particular iteration of it only about a month now. As you can see, it runs in the browser and it's deployed. So if someone wants to come try to break it, they can. You have to log in with Twitch. That's the currently only way to log in. Right now, all I support is being able to double click and move around. The goal of this game to me is to try to build and there's no good network prediction in right now, and it's based on WebSockets, so there's going to be some jitters here and there. So there's a lot of stuff to work on still, but I've got some pretty interesting stuff already built up from the architecture, so I wanted to kind of show off what I've got here. So as you can see, this planet orbits here. There's certain aspects of realism that I wanted to bring into this game, even though it's going to be a sci-fi / fantasy universe. Part of it is that other space games that I've played in the past often have very static universes where things don't orbit. And I recognize that planets like Jupiter, or some of the ones that take, multiple years to orbit, Earth years rather, to orbit, will not really move on a day-to-day basis in the universe, or even on a year-to-year basis. But things like moons and satellites and stuff being in different positions when people navigate around the universe can be fun. So it looks like some people decided to join. So I'm going to go ahead and show what it looks like to jump to another solar system. It's going to align in the direction of that solar system on the star map that existed. And there we go. So I don't have corrective maneuvers in. There's a lot of stuff to work on. It is completely open. Well, technically it's not completely open source yet, but it's almost all open source. My goal is to try to get all of the assets created in like a Creative Commons license, so that it really can be a truly open source game. I'm going to be exploring a lot more of simulation aspects of an MMO. One of the ideas that I really want to explore is essentially the idea of like a space station simulator. If you imagine playing like Lemonade Stand in a multiplayer environment where you're running like shops inside of a space station, where you're competing against other players for the traffic of the simulated populations of people that are going between the stations, and then mix that with travel via spaceship to do trade between different planets and stuff. So I am curious if I only have 2 very small Fargate instances running right now. So and each system is processed independently. So those 2 nodes should be splitting the work evenly right now. So yeah, it's a very early project. I don't have a good scope document of where all I'm going with it. I just wanted to show off what I've been working on. So this is using YEW as the WebAssembly front end that renders the virtual DOM. So I'm able to render, essentially just an HTML interface over Canvas. This is not currently using, looks like, thank you for people logging in. I'm glad to actually see multiple people and it's not breaking right away. So, yeah, I'm not really sure what else to talk about. Feel free to follow along. There's links inside of this page on cosmicverge.com. It has my discourse forums, my own Discord server, which isn't super popular yet. I do stream on Twitch occasionally. I've been trying to get a little bit more into it. So you can sometimes catch me on there working on the game. So if there's any questions, let me know.
Awesome. This is definitely pretty cool. I think one of the things that I've been pretty interested with is the potential for using...
It's actually really fun seeing all these people.
Oh, wait. Oh, shoot. I forgot I'm on Discord. Okay, there we go. Yeah, now I'm audible on Discord. All right. So, yeah, I really like sort of the potential of running stuff in the browser. I've been looking at some other sort of MMO games that can be run in the browser, and I'm also really interested in like the future path for like distributed work across like multiple different servers in like a data center or something like that, especially since Rust can do stuff in such a elegant and safe way. And so you said you're using a couple different Fargate instances, and so each WebSocket is just connecting to one Fargate instance and then is connecting to one central database or something else.
Not exactly. Yes, to some extent. I'm using Redis as an in-memory kind of synchronization between the servers. So that is serving as a database, absolutely. I also have a Postgres instance, which I'm going to be using for all the relational transactional stuff to do like market type stuff. But the pilot positioning and then flying around in space is all synchronized via Redis between the Fargate instances. I use Redis to acquire locks to make sure that only one of the servers picks each system to update each second. This operates on a similar tick style as EVE Online, where the server only sends updates once a second. That's why you're seeing jumps around, is when there's network latency that's more than just the average or different than the average. That's when you're going to see the jumps on the screen. Or potentially, I haven't really fine-tuned how good that loop of once a second runs. I haven't done any load testing. I'm very early in deploying it. So essentially, there's a loop that happens on the server once a second on all servers that tries to acquire a lock on Redis. Whoever wins the lock queues up all the systems in Redis to process. And then the servers work together to process the entire list of servers. So in theory, if one system gets really busy, one server will take longer to process that, and the other servers will do more systems in the time. Like I said, I've written it, but I haven't actually tested it very well. So, I need to actually write the ability for me to connect a bot client. Essentially, right now you have to authenticate with Twitch, so I need to have some sort of token-based authentication, and then I'm going to stand up 50, 100,000 pilots and see how it goes.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think definitely the idea of like the bot instances and like load balancing is like a really exciting type of thing, because you often will get to a point where you just come up with bottlenecks that you never assumed that you would, and it's definitely a lot of fun to reach that point. Like having like 11 people on right now, and like we can see this working pretty well. That's definitely pretty cool. I remember like with Veloren, when we released 0.8, we had like I think like 100 people in our like on our server at once, and it just blew our mind that our server could get that large. Because for the most part, like,
and I know I'm still sharing my screen.
Oh yeah,
I'm perfectly fine sharing all.
Oh yeah, the AWS kind of stuff. Yeah.
I wanted to see if I can see the metrics on the server.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool to see. Yeah, so just a few instances set up here. 2 separate tasks.
Yep. Oops, the metrics are here.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, and these are running, I think, I'd have to go look. But again, this is all open source. So if we switched over to this project, you can see the actual deployment we have going on here. So let's see, task. I can't remember. Let's see. Memory reservation should be RAM. Actually, never mind. I'm not going to be able to find it really quickly here. This is a big file.
Yeah.
There was. I only reserved 512 megs of RAM, and I asked for a quarter of a CPU, I think, is what 256 stands for.
Yeah.
So I'm still, with this recent how did it do 723 minutes? That's really weird. I'm not sure how often it aggregates these stats. Apparently not very. But anyways, it looks like we're still hovering only at like 10% CPU with several people hopping on. So it's not very intensive in terms of what all has to do to update. If you don't have a current destination planned, you're basically idle. So
yeah, well, I mean that's a really good structure to have, is to be able to find all of the places where you can leave a client idle, because they're still connected with WebSocket, so they can still receive updates when they need. And especially since you're only updating once per second, then this type of idea I think can scale really well. So yeah, this is definitely a pretty awesome project.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so I'll start by introducing myself. So my name is Anhat Singh, and I'm a 13-year-old programmer. And I made a game called Call of Ferris, and I'm gonna showcase it today. So let's go to the cargo.toml file and just read the description out. So it's a thrilling action game where your favorite Ferris the crab, the Rust mascot, got guns and has taken up the daily duty to find the evil doll languages like, the Golang, while managing to keep itself alive and take part in this awesome adventure and help Ferris to be the best crab ever. So this is the repository of the project, and it has two main features. So let's just run the game. And it's taking time. I just ran it like 10 seconds ago. And it's up. So this is the game. And let's run it. So we started by this Ferris coming from the top and falling from the sky. And then the feature of this game is that when you like try to jump, you can go in slow motion, and then just you can switch your guns using the down arrow key and just shoot gophers. And you can use grappling guns and shoot them. And it shows up at the top how many evil doors are left, so you can just kill all of them. And all of this is loaded from a map file that I just created. So it has .end text, which is shown at the end of the game, and the using weapon is the main weapon that is the default weapon when you use the game. So once you die, then you gotta restart the game, and you're back again. So if you just win the game, let's try to win it one time. And we're out of guns. As you can see, this is not like the fully working game. So it's kind of working, but it's not really working. So you can see the you win screen. So we Russians love all animals and do not want to disappoint them like the gophers. We also have animals in our language like cow. We just love the correct animals. And that's the game.
All right, that's pretty cool. I think this is pretty neat to see. Like a small little project. Was this for like a game jam or anything, or was this kind of just something that you did on your own? One sec here. I'll stop. There we go. Oh wait, one second. Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself on Discord again. I should just leave myself unmuted. That makes so much more sense. Yeah, so I was saying super cool. Was this for a game jam project or just sort of something you're working on your own?
It's just my personal project.
That's pretty cool. And I'm also sort of wondering a little bit about the tech stack. So with what you used for this, so what kind of technologies did you use? And then also I'm sort of interested in like as like a young developer, what got you into like using Rust in particular?
Okay, so so I started by I found Rust by just in a Discord server. It mentioned that Rust is really cool, and I just liked Python for some minutes, and then I just checked out Rust. I tried it for 1 week, then I never used Python again.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like a lot of people who come from like the Python world, which I think is quite interesting. Because like Python is like a very
Reddit
different.
just hangs out in the Rust community.
Yeah. I personally use like Python a lot, and I use Rust a lot, and I am like I like all languages except I like some more, and so but I think definitely.
Yeah, I like now like 8 languages.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's good to have like a good repository of just like knowledge across different languages. And so how long have you been working on it for, on the project?
Like half of the month, and I just didn't work in like fully. So if you check the repository time, it's more than like months. But I did work. If you check the work time, it's just a month or half a month.
Nice. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And there is another feature called debug. So if you run it with debug, it will show you the axis line bounding box on the side.
That's pretty cool. I think someone said in chat that the map file that you use is pretty cool, like data-driven.
Yeah, I just didn't bother to use a tile map system, so I just made my own one.
Nice. I mean, as long as it works, right?
Yeah.
Just seeing if there's anything else here in chat. Yeah, I think there's like a Rust crate that you can embed Python code into Rust, so that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. And here's the debug one. So if you just start the game again, so you can see the axis line bounding box, and you can see the collision system.
Interesting. That's pretty cool. Yeah, having debug features. I recently did a game jam, and just having sort of like a background debug that you can just turn on to see a lot of stuff makes it very, very nice.
And from like 3 days ago, I've been working on my own programming language, and I'm trying to make it so that it can be used as a scripting language and as a normal language too. So currently, so if you want to embed it in your game, you can, and it will run in a JIT environment. So like most scripting languages are interpreted, so this will be just in time compiled and run. So it can be used as both as native and as a scripting language. So currently it can like everything, almost everything, but it won't like code gen it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just do a function, it will take a return type that if it like don't pass a return type, it will automatically think that it's void. So let's do, we are returning a number and return -1, and this is the return type, signature argument types, and the function IR. So if you just make another argument like like string, and it can show the argument types right there.
Huh. That's quite something. That's definitely a really good side project to start on. Is like working on a language. I think you learn so much from it. Have you checked out the Mun language written in Rust?
No.
I'd recommend taking a look at that. They're building a scripting language in Rust that has it's. I think some of the intentions were that it was sort of based on Lua in a way, in that like you can hot reload stuff in your code, but then you can also get like the same speed as a compiled
like
language.
try to make this hot reloadable, because it can be just because it's just in time compiled, and I use LLVM to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like Rust also uses LLVM, like Swift also uses LLVM.
Yeah. It's definitely a pretty nice backend. All right. Well, thank you very much for showing off.
Thank you.
All right, so next up we have Mr. Dimas here to show off the RG3D engine demo.
Yeah, exactly. Let me introduce myself real quick. I'm the former tools programmer of the Veloren studios, the studio that made Divinity Original Sin game series, and currently working on the Baldur's Gate 3. And I'm working on the RG3D game engine for 2 years, and for the last 8 months, I'm working on it full time as I left Larian. And this is the basic demo for the engine. It shows like basic features like the scene, the graphics, the animations, and the other stuff, collisions, physics, and so on. So yeah, what the engine is capable of. It has the differentiated render, so there's probably it can handle a lot of lights without significant overhead. So it also has the volumetric lights, so you can compare now what the volumetric lights are. If I turn them off, you can see like light balls here, and also the spotlights. So it also has animation blending machines, where you can blend multiple animations together to get some interesting results. Like I can jump this character. Also, there is a sound, but I think probably Discord can't actually capture it. I'm not sure why. All right, so this is not like classic DCS engine, as no DCS engine. It uses just more like classical approach for the stuff where you have objects and they lie in collections. And for the efficient memory management, I use generation arenas. Generation arenas allow you to tightly pack objects in the memory and reference them by handles to the object. So it's looking like an ECS, but there are no components. It's more like a classical OP approach. Also, the engine has lots of other stuff. I think most of you who are familiar with the graphics can already see, but I will quickly tell what else it has. It has a full-featured scene graph where each node can be of different type, and it can have different relations between objects, so they can be connected to each other. This character has a bones inside it, so it has complex hierarchy, and the bones actually driving this skin. So this is a skin mesh, and also the engine has quick save, quick load functionality, if I can call it like that. Basically, it just allows you to save and load the state of the engine in one call of the function. Also, it's able to render in texture. It has a geometry instancing. It has a screen space ambient occlusion. It has a level of detail system for to reduce the amount of triangles rendered on screen for the distant objects. It supports FBX loader, so it's more or less like in widely used engines like in Unity or Unreal Engine. So it supports FBX model formats. It also has the GUI system. I'll talk about it later because it's a really huge theme. And it also has a lot of other examples. I'll show you rest of examples, probably someone interested in. But now I'll switch to the editor. The engine has the editor too. And yeah, that's the editor. So let me just load the scene real quick. Where is it? That's fine. So that's the editor, and this is the scene from my current project I'm doing with the RJ3D game engine. So what it capable of is just it allows you to build scenes using some assets like in other engines, like in Unity, Unreal Engine, Godot, and other stuff. So yeah, I have like a barrel model. I can drop it in, select it. Where is it? Yeah, that's it. So I can like put it in here. I can rotate it, scale it, and so on. Add a physical body, collider. What is it? What it should be? A cylinder, right? And also I can change its radius and so on. So also apart from that, it uses the engine's ability to have a hierarchical asset management to build complex models. So what it means, you can just have a resource, probably like should be, yeah, this one, the Starship bar. It is actually the separate file which is called Starship section fbx. So it is embedded in the scene, and you can use this scene and embed into other scene. So it is hierarchical resource management, and also I forgot to mention the engine has async resource management, so it is able to load multiple assets at the same time. So the editor also have the previewer for the models you have in your assets folder. It also has a preview for the textures. Yeah, some of them are just a single channel because that's why they are red, and other stuff. It also has the undo redo system, so any change can be undone, so and redone, as you can see. Yeah, and you can just like save your scene and like test it. And here goes the next part. And the next part is the game. So this is the main menu. Let me just zoom in. So the menu isn't fancy, so it like allows you to change controls, change sound settings, change graphics, change various graphical options, and yeah. Oh, that's the back. It should be centered. Yeah, that's the game. So this game utilizes all the features the game engine has. So it has the UI. You already seen that in the editor. Its features, and it uses basically all the things the engine has. So it also uses the raycasting for the sight on the rifle. It uses asset management to load scenes. You can save the game, load the game. Yeah, and here is our first guy, which we can shoot, and yeah, he's lying down. So for pathfinding, the engine uses navigational meshes. So this guy is pretty fast, so it can chase you down. But for some reason, he decided to like just stand there. So yeah, we need some more powerful weapon. For some reason, they are still can just stuck in the walls, but I'm working on that. That's just the incorrect navigational mesh its vertices can be like in here or in here, so the bot can't manage to go through that door. And yeah, the game has the source of inspiration is the Dead Space series. So you can, like, if somebody played it, you can spot that the main character has this rig on the back, which shows its health. But for now, I put the bullet counter on the back too. But I will move it to the near the weapon. And here is our other guy. It is pretty slow, but it is like very powerful. The bots doesn't have a hit reaction animation yet, so they like can take shots without reacting to them, and yeah. So what else can I show? There's lots of stuff actually, but I just like it will take forever if I will focus on every aspect. So
I think we could go over some questions now if you like. A lot of people have been saying how like impressive it is to have this like fully fleshed out engine that you're working on. I think there's definitely a lot of really cool stuff here. Someone else asked about the health bar, but you did go over that. People are mentioning pathfinding is hard, and it definitely is. For the tech stack, I'm not sure if you mentioned all of it, but for most of what you're doing, did you have to recreate a lot of, or not recreate, but did you have to create a lot of stuff from scratch, or were you able to use a lot of stuff in the Rust ecosystem already?
I made the engine entirely from scratch, using some libraries to help myself. It's the font loader, the textures loader, and the rest of stuff I made by myself. The engine has a powerful sound engine, but I can't show it here because the game doesn't have sound yet, so it just has a placeholder for the footsteps, for the weapons. It has powerful UI, as you've seen in the editor. This UI is custom. It doesn't use any of the available UIs. So yeah, I can show it again. Where is it? Yeah, this all is custom. So where's the level? All right. And yeah, I use custom renderer. Everything basically, like 19% of 90% of stuff, or even more, is custom.
Yeah,
So,
that's definitely a lot, and with the editor as well. That's built from scratch as well, right?
yeah, it took 2 years. Last year, no, not last year, like last 7 months. I'm working on it full time. Before
Yeah.
that, I worked on it in my free time after work. So yeah. What else I can mention? Actually,
One more question is, who made the assets?
The models were taken from. I mean, the character models were taken from Mixama, Mixama.com. Animations were taken from there too because it is really, really, really hard to do them with decent quality. So the rest, weapon models were taken from free sources. The starship stuff, like you see here, was made by myself, but it has like placeholders in some places. Textures were taken from textures.com. It is free. and the materials were made in Substance Painter. As you can see, these panels were made in Substance Painter. So yeah, a lot of assets were taken from the internet, but some assets were made by myself in the 3ds Max, and yeah, materials were made in Substance Painter.
Awesome, very cool. Well, thank you very much, Dimitri, for showing this off.
Cool.
I think there's some other things that you can definitely reply to in chat, but we'll get moving on next with Tarash, who will show off Dotrix. All right, so next up we have Elias, who's going to show us off a little bit more of the Dotrix engine, which is a little bit of an update from last month's meetup.
Yeah, last month we already had an integration with eGUI, and we decided to prepare a standalone example that shows how you can integrate the UI into your application. And our developer, it was done not by me, but I think it is amazing work. He was he was really impressed by the engine and liked it so much, so he introduced a couple new features to the engine itself. First, he created this application where you can play and, for example, change the scale of model by different axes and see how it all works together. You can switch animations, control them. New feature that he introduced is this speed control. Before there was no control of animation speed. You can also play with camera, but we had this, of course, before. And he also introduced lighting color change. It was actually implemented in the engine, but I never tested before. So he did, and he also liked it so much that he started to play more with it. And he implemented more types of lighting in the engine. And I don't have it in the application yet, but I have a video. I don't know. Now you probably still see the running fox, right? Okay, so I will switch the screen. For some reason, Discord doesn't allow me to share. Here it is. So yes, now you should see everything.
All
so
right.
here is the
It's just
updated
loading up
version
for a
of this
second. Let me
application.
just wait on this to load properly.
It is just.
It's just still coming up on my side. Sometimes mine takes a little bit to load it up.
Okay, I can wait.
All right, let me see. Are other people in? Oh, okay, wait, we're good to go.
So here is the video I got from him with some more lighting settings, some more types of lighting, and something that we had known before, like this directional lighting. But it's just a video. I'm still waiting for some pull request from him with the update, but I'm very excited about this. The next thing which I was working on for last month is editor for the terrain. I will be a little bit shy after the previous project, but still I would like to show it. So I was working on Martian cubes terrain. We decided to go with Martian cubes because it is easy to make. I would say relatively easy to make. It's destructible or constructible, and we really like how it looks. So terrain was implemented, and I showed it last time. Martian cubes is not that complicated thing, but what was complicated is level of details. And now you can see that I have more detailed center and less detailed sides. I'm highlighting them, and you can now see that less detailed chunks of the terrain are 2 times higher, 2 times bigger than more detailed ones. It is also dynamical. So for example, I can move my camera and you see that terrain in front became more detailed, and now you can see that terrain behind became less detailed.
Yeah, this is definitely super cool. So for the so last month you showed some stuff off as well. Do you have any plans for this month on what type of stuff you'll be working on?
Yes, of course. First, I made this seamless terrain, and I found recently that it doesn't works perfectly for joins by y-axis. I can show you a couple of things now. I will regenerate the terrain completely. With the different noise parameters. And now you can see that when level of details change by y-axis, there are still some seams, but I already found where is the problem, so I think I can fix it. It generates quite fast. It's just about 100 milliseconds. And works on almost 60 FPS, which is now less because I am broadcasting, but normally I have 60 FPS without a problem. Next steps here is, of course, fix this. I want to continue with the raycasting. I will switch to some better looking terrain. I've implemented some basic raycasting, which highlights all the chunks that are intersected for now. So that is why you see several chunks highlighted, because now I'm like looking through all of the chunks because all of them are like in cubes. When I look from the top, I can highlight some single ones easier. So the next thing is brushes. I want to implement the better detection of in which chunk the ray intersects the terrain itself. And from this point, I can calculate the brush radius and apply some transformation to density, density functions, density values. It is also built using octrees. It is not that visible now because I just have rings of details, but in fact this terrain allows me to have a combination of different level of details. Like this chunk could be detailed, like all these 4, and here I can have less detailed chunk because there is less details by the model of the terrain, and it should save some performance, some CPU time and GPU time for me. And when terrain will be really editable, it will be, of course, much more noticeable. I am thinking a lot about how to show this brush area. This is also there are some also open questions still, because I don't know any other Martian Cubes editor. So I'm inspiring from Astroneer game and some existing height map terrain editors, and I need to choose some solutions. Probably there will be several types of brushes. One brush will be to edit heights of the terrain, and with some other types I will be able to apply more detailed transformations, like to make, I don't know, caves, cliffs, and so.
Interesting. Yeah, this is definitely something that I'm pretty excited to see how it comes along in the future months, and I hope you show it off again next month. We have a question in chat. Are there any demos on the UI, like adding images, a simple rectangle, or health bars, or anything like that, or is it mostly just like an engine that's malleable for like 3D modeling terrain?
No, I'm not sure I understand the question. You mean some overlays, some additional overlays to this UI, or what?
Well, I suppose so. As a 3D engine, I'm just pulling up the GitHub now. The 3D engine, your focus is mostly on the 3D side of things, and so have you put much thought into like the 2D UI and other things that will interact with it, or are you expecting that if someone's going to use Dotrix, they will use like a different library on top of it, or create rather?
Dotrix itself has some interface to integrate any kind of overlay. Currently, we needed something for the UI, and we made integration with EGUI, but definitely there will be some more solutions to health bars, spells, I don't know, whatever, when we will get closer to these features.
Awesome. Looks good. Well, thank you very much for Elias for showing it off. It's definitely pretty cool.
Yeah, maybe some last thing that I want to mention is that we finally upgraded to recent version of WGPU, which is 0.7. So nothing blocks us from releasing to crates IO, and the engine is already there. And by the end of this month, we planned to prepare full documentation for the engine.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be good to see.
For us, important step.
Yes.
I even maybe pause development of the editor for a little bit, but I want to deliver some good documentation.
Yeah.
Document all the code.
It's always fun working in an engine, that's for sure. Documentation takes a lot of work to get all the way finished. All right.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much, Elias. So I'm just going to bring back up the Rust presentation here. Oh yes, and of course, I haven't said it throughout the entire presentation because I was trying to make sure everything was working, but big claps to everybody who presented today. We got some really cool projects going on. So if you're in the Discord, feel free to drop a clap, react, or reach out to the people who did the presentations. There's definitely some pretty cool things going on in the ecosystem right now. If anybody has announcements they want me to make, feel free to just DM me. But for the major stuff right now, we have... of course, the Rust newsletter, or Rust Gamedev newsletter is out. Came out about a week ago, I think, and so make sure to give that a read. For the Rust Gamedev podcast, we have a new episode that came out on. Okay, this is outdated, but it came out on the 21st of January, and so you can go check that out. That's a pretty cool interview with Alex Ana about his work on Dwarf World. We should have another episode coming out in the next week or so, I think, but I'm not entirely sure on that. And then other than that, I'm trying to think of anything else. If you want to present at the next Rust Gamedev Meetup, feel free to message myself, and I can give you a form that will get you to fill out. Super short form, just makes it so that I can see pretty easily who's looking to present stuff. So thank you everybody for coming out to the second Rust Gamedev Meetup, and I will see everybody next month.